For as long as I can remember, I've been fascinated by the Soviet Union, which might seem a little strange considering I'm so young it never existed in my lifetime. But as I've grown older, I've started to realise I wasn't fascinated with the Union, I was fascinated with the propaganda of the Union. I'm not talking about the lies the Soviet Union told throughout the years, because it's not about the message, it's about the way it's told. And I think with maturity, the Soviet Union became the master of propaganda. Now let's look at some examples of the craftsmanship. Now I'm from Britain, so let's look at some British examples first. Take this poster for example. It's simple, its message is clear, and its purpose is clear. But it doesn't fill you with emotion, it just tells you what to do. Now let's take a look at this Soviet piece. It's probably the most inspiring piece I've found. It shows a baby being stood on with a Nazi boot next to it, and the caption says, "Death to baby murderers." Now in my mind, there's simply no comparison between the two. Both are interesting pieces of propaganda. You know exactly what you need to do. In the first instance, save bread, and in the second instance, kill Nazis. But I'm sure I don't have to tell you which one stirs more emotion. Now I don't think much of this is going to make sense without an historical perspective, so here's a short history lesson in the form of the numbers, just so we can get some understanding. For the British during World War II, we lost 380,000 people in combat, with a civilian death toll of 70,000 people. And throughout the Second World War, the British Army peaked at around 3 million people serving in combat. Whereas for the Soviet Union, the casualties sit at 27 million, 8 million being military casualties. And the army went through 34 million people during the war. Just to put that into perspective, that means about 1% of the British public ended up dying because of the war. Whereas for the Soviet Union, that was 13%, meaning that 1 in 10 people ended up dead. This is why in Russia they do not call it the Second World War. They call it the Great Patriotic War. Now, the Soviet Union has come and gone. It collapsed 30 years ago at time of recording. The Cold War and hopes of communist supremacy died with it. But the more things change, the more they stay the same. The best pieces of propaganda I think the Union produced were the various opera-like performances of various patriotic and World War songs. And after the Union's collapse, that legacy was left behind. After the collapse of an extremely ideological regime, new regimes typically try and scrub their memory from existence. And some of that did happen. Take the very well-known Soviet national anthem. It has a surprisingly complex history. Initially, the Soviet Union used the Internationale, but during the Great War, Stalin commissioned a new song, the very well-known anthem, except the one you're listening to isn't the anthem Stalin came up with. Stalin's version had a verse entirely dedicated to himself. After Stalin's death and de-Stalinization, this led to an official version of the song with no lyrics, before being replaced with a new version that focuses on Lenin and communism more generally. And after the Union's collapse, the anthem was abolished in favour of the patriotic song. Now praise be to Putin on this one, because he threw that out and replaced it with the original anthem, but this time with a pro-Russia message, and all references to communism removed. Incredibly, all 3 of these changes were made by the same guy, Sergei Mikhalkov. Yeah, try saying that 10 times. But this is a trend you can see in all of those opera-like musicals. Modern day Russia still has them, and this is where I'm going to start to piss off the communists, because none of this is exclusive to any ideology. You can get the same greatness from a White Army song that you can get from a Red Army song. and since the collapse of the Union, many Russian figures have taken up the slack. I'm going to focus on the two I find most interesting. Vladimir Putin's favourite band, Lube, with lead singer Nikolai Rastogoyev, and Oleg Gazmanov. You've already been listening to Lube's song Combat.
Комбат, батяня, батяня, комбат. Ты сердце не прятал за спины ребят.
But seeing their transition from the Soviet era to the Russian era, I think can be most starkly seen in the song "The Red Army is the greatest army in the world."
Красная армия, доблестный флот, непобедимый, как наш народ. Ведь от тайги до британских морей Красная армия всех сильней. Да будет красная, непобедима, на страже Родины родной. И все должны мы неудержимо идти на справедливый бой. Мир мы построим на этой земле, с верой и правдою во главе. Весь от тайги до британских морей русская армия всех сильней.
As you can see, he changed out Red Army with Russian Army, but I'm going to put the old lyrics on screen just so you can get a sense of how much reforming there really was to do. Yeah, yikes. But I think the king of rehabilitation has to be the legendary shitposter Oleg Gazmanov. His song Forward Russia is entirely new, but somehow he's managed to make it fit in with the old traditional choirs.
Так было в России с далеких времен. Чем выше давление, тем крепче бетон. И если опасность державе грозит, становится Родина как монолит. В горниле победы сегодня как сталь опять закаляется Родины сталь. Россия, Россия, в этом слове огонь и сила, в этом слове победы пламя, поднимаем России знамя.
What is that? What the fuck is that?
Yeah, that got him banned from Lithuania and Latvia, and the reason they gave was through words and actions having contributed to the undermining of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Yeah, that's how good this guy is. And due to the song's success, Oleg found himself performing it with the Red Army Choir successors. Now I think we've almost entirely lost out on this sort of thing in the UK. I can only think of one performance that mirrors this sort of thing, and that has to be Rule Britannia in the Royal Opera House. But at the same time, we've got to deal with this kind of shit.
Try and explain to me why Rule Britannia is offensive.
Well, I mean, the song was written in, the middle of the 1700s, and that was when Britain was fully partaking in the slave trade. So to have lyrics like Rule Britannia and saying Britons will never, never, never be slaves, while then fully participating in slavery, in 2019, I find that completely out of date.
So you would ban it too, would you?
Yeah.
Toby, back in
it's just
2002, Rule Britannia was removed from the repertoire of the last night of the proms. That's where we really see it such a sung in its full glory, in a break from tradition, because the American chief conductor of the BBC Symphony Orchestra claimed the choice was a nod to the views of the public and growing disdain for the track. That was Leonard Zlatin.
Now think about that for a minute. They actually cancelled a performance because of quote-unquote public opinion. Yeah, there was no public opinion on this. It was progressives on Twitter. In my experience, there's only one other piece of art in Britain that shows this sort of thing. And it's from The Crown, which is a TV show on Netflix.
Ship me somewhere east of Suez, where the best is like the worst, where there are no 10 commandments and a man can raise a thirst. For the temple bells are calling, and it's there that I would be, by the old Moulmein Pagoda, looking lazy at the sea. On the road to Mandalay, where the old flotilla lay, with our sick beneath the awnings, when we went to Mandalay. Oh, the road to Mandalay.
fact, I got so salty about this, I decided to find out if it was true. So, I went to Russia.
Take me to Russia, wanna drive a tank, drink and have some fun, until we see the dawn. Take me to Russia, so what can you be? Vodka almost free, hard base is motherland. Take me to Russia, wanna drive a tank, drink and have some fun, until we see the dawn. Take me to Russia, gangsta KGB, Russian bears gonna set you free.
Okay, one thing out of the way that I hated first. Whenever I ordered tea in this country, no one would give you milk with it. They would look at me like I'm some kind of disgusting foreigner for wanting milk with my tea. But it was good to see that the books I studied when I was younger did turn out to be incredibly useful. Take the Moscow Metro, for example. This is the map today, and this is the map during the Soviet Union. Although some of it didn't come in useful, like I don't think this connect the world thing would be accepted in this kind of day and age. One of the things I came to see they did have plenty of. They don't just have Lenin's tomb in the square. You can find Soviet symbols and Soviet achievements and propaganda all over the city. And of course, most prominently, on the very, very famous subway. In fact, during my time here, I was lucky enough to run into a few political people. And some of the conservatives that I met did actually want to undertake a decommunization of the country. They wanted to take all these symbols and figures down. And it's easy to see why. Only a few months ago, Franco was dug up from his tomb in Madrid. And imagine if they had a tomb containing Hitler instead of the Holocaust Memorial outside the Reichstag in Berlin. So it's not hard to feel sympathetic with these guys, but I did find myself disagreeing. Sure, if you did take them down, it would please people who dislike communism, and if you kept them up, you would please the communists. But I think we should run a thought experiment. Let's say Churchill was the most evil bastard in all of history, and we put up statues to him in the UK. Let's say we renamed avenues and streets after him. Now, even though he was an evil bastard, we did all of this, and perhaps we even voted him into power. So now you have two options. You can either tear everything down to try and scrub away the shame, or you can keep it up to remind you and your people of what you did. And in my opinion, we have to agree with the second position, because the alternative is that the only statues and figures we keep up are just of popular figures, when that's not really what these sort of things are about. These sort of things are about commemorating history, and I think you should commemorate the history that you're proud of and not so proud of. And I think this applies to any statue or memorial people put up, regardless of where it comes from or what political ideology it comes from. It's all part of your history, shameful or not. And that's what I find most interesting about all this Soviet stuff. All of these opera-like performances. They didn't ban them. They didn't make singing Katusha in the barracks forbidden. In fact, they've managed to do the exact opposite. They've taken the horrors of the past and they've built upon them. They seem to have this agreement where it's all the tapestry of Russia, regardless if it was communist or not. National anthem notwithstanding, of course. But I think you might agree with me when I say this kind of compromise sounds best.
Нам чужой земли не надо, мы чужого не берем, а свое назад вернем. Знаем, помним, не забудем, защищать страну мы будем, от Аляски до Кремля. Это родина моя, это родина моя, и делить ее нельзя. Это матушка Россия, это русская земля. Это родина моя, и делить ее нельзя. Это матушка Россия, это русская земля.
There's a North Korean flag on that bus. What the fuck?